In the vast archive of American visual history, there's a recurring character that often goes unnoticed. It's not a president, a general, or a celebrity. It's a substance. Smoke. For the first 100 years of photography, smoke was the antagonist of the camera. It was the blur that ruined the plate, the haze that lowered the contrast, the chaotic element that refused to sit still for the long exposure times of the 19th century. Yet, as we look back at the daguerreotypes, tintypes, and silver gelatin prints of the American story, smoke reveals itself not as an obstruction, but as a narrator. From the gunpowder gray of the Civil War to the soot-black plumes of the Industrial Revolution, and finally to the terrifying white mushroom cloud of the Atomic Age, the history of America can be read through its haze. This is the story of how a nation built itself, fought itself, and defined itself, all hidden behind a smokescreen. Photography came of age during the American Civil War. Matthew Brady, Alexander Garner, and Timothy O'Sullivan hauled their heavy glass plates and portable darkrooms onto the fields of Antietam and Gettysburg. But there's a peculiar silence in their photos. We see the dead lined up for burial. We see generals posing by tents. We see fortifications. But we rarely see the battle itself. Why? Because of smoke. The black powder used in muskets and cannons during the 1860s produced immense, blinding clouds of white-gray smoke. Within minutes of an engagement beginning, the battlefield would become invisible. This fog of war was literal. For the slow lenses of the era, which required several seconds of exposure, capturing a moving battle in this haze was impossible. Terefore, smoke in Civil War photography represents the unseen. It represents the chaos that the camera could not capture. When we see a photograph of a quiet, smoky haze hanging over a valley in Virginia in 1863, we are looking at the lingering ghost of violence. The smoke served as a shroud, hiding the brutal, mechanical reality of death from the American public, leaving only the aftermath. It shaped a visual narrative of the war that was strangely static and solemn, rather than kinetic and chaotic. As the cannons fell silent, a new kind of smoke rose to take their place. This was the era of the Second Industrial Revolution. In the late 19th century, smoke wasn't considered pollution. It was celebrated as prosperity. In the photographs of Pittsburgh, Chicago, and Detroit from this era, the sky is almost never clear. Photographers like Alfred Stieglitz, in his famous work, The Hand of Man, captured the gritty, atmospheric beauty of steam engines and factory stacks. In these images, the black plume rising from a locomotive or a steel mill was a visual metaphor for American power. It was the flag of the economy. Postcards from the early 1900s often artificially added more smoke to factory chimneys to make the businesses look busier and more successful. However, a closer look at the photography of social reformers like Jacob Riis and Louis Hine reveals the cost of this smoke. In heinous photos of child laborers, the air is thick and heavy. The atmospheric perspective, usually a technique in painting to show distance here, becomes a suffocating cage. The smoke in these photos creates a sense of claustrophobia. It traps the subjects. In the steel mills of Pennsylvania, the mixture of steam and coal dust created a permanent twilight. This smoke tells the story of the immigrant struggle, a visual testament to the lungs that breathed in the particulates of progress. By the mid-20th century, smoke moved from the battlefield and the factory into the city streets and the private room. This was the golden age of the cigarette, and it radically changed the aesthetic of American photography. We entered the world of film noir and the crime photography of Ouija, and the high-contrast black and white photos of New York City crime scenes, jazz clubs, and backrooms. Cigarette smoke acted as a visual texture. It caught the harsh light of the flashbulb, creating swirling, ethereal shapes against the darkness. In portraiture, smoke became a tool of psychology. A cloud of smoke hovering around a subject's face suggested mystery, anxiety, or deep thought. It was the visual language of cool. Photographs of J. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, often show him framed by the delicate wisp of a cigarette. It suggests a nervous energy, a mind burning through fuel. This was the era where smoke became cinematic. It was no longer just an industrial byproduct. It was a mood. It shaped the American self-image as sophisticated, slightly dangerous, and shrouded in shadow. The narrative of smoke in America culminates in one singular, terrifying image. The mushroom cloud, beginning with the Trinity test in 1945, and continuing through the testing at Bikini Atoll and the Nevada test site. Government photographers capture the most significant smoke in human history. These images are distinct from all others. They're often symmetrical, awe-inspiring, and horrifyingly beautiful. In these color photographs, the smoke is no longer gray or black. It is burning orange, radioactive violet, and blinding white. This smoke did not obscure the view. It was the view. It represented the ultimate triumph of American science and the ultimate threat to American existence. The visual narrative shifted here. Smoke was no longer about labor or confusion. It was about extinction. The duck and cover films and the photos of families watching nuclear tests from their porches in Las Vegas show a nation mesmerized by its own toxic power. The mushroom cloud became the icon of the Cold War, a pillar of smoke that guided the nation's foreign policy for 40 years. As we moved into the late 20th century, the smoke began to clear. The Clean Air Act of 1963, the decline of heavy industry, and the crusade against tobacco chased the smoke away from the American lens. Modern digital photography is sharp, high definition, and usually crystal clear. We no longer tolerate the haze. But by looking back at the smoky archives from the gunsmoke of Gettysburg to the coal dust of Pittsburgh and the neon-lit cigarette haze of 1940s New York, we realized that the smoke was not just a visual flaw. It was the texture of time. It was the physical manifestation of the energy America burned to become what it is today. To understand the history of this nation, one must look not just at the people or the land, but at the air between them.